For my first case study, I chose the right choice in Chapter 12 on page 284. Students are given a 10-hour community service project at a nonprofit agency of their choice and instructed to write a 3-page paper about their experience that is to be turned in electronically. The day comes for all the assignments to be turned in, and the professor begins reading an extremely well-written paper. To be safe, the professor decides to copy and paste a section of the paper into a Google search to see if anything similar has been published. Sure enough, 90% of the student's paper has been copied from a nonprofit organization's brochure from the next state over. As with every college that I am aware of, plagiarism is prohibited. At this student's school, plagiarism is to be reported to the review board, and if the plagiarism is verified, the student is dismissed from the college until being eligible for reapplication the next semester. However, should they be readmitted, they will be placed on an academic probation for a year. So the professor begins to think about the circumstances involving this student. She knows that the student has been caring for her ill mother, who lives 2 hours away from campus. The student has been given accommodations throughout the semester, as it was her last semester before graduation. The student already has a job lined up for after graduation. Instead of reporting the incident, the professor decides to meet with the student one-on-one. The student admits to the plagiarizing, stating that she had run out of time and was only able to write 1 page instead of the 3 as assigned. The professor took a lenient approach and gave the student a 0 for the assignment, but decided not to report the plagiarizing to prevent the student from being unable to graduate and begin employment where a job had been lined up. So the first question presented at the end of the case study asked if, even though the professor deviated from the college's policy regarding plagiarism, do you feel that she has acted ethically? My answer is no. While I understand that circumstances arise that prevent work from getting done, there are appropriate steps to take. As a college student myself, I constantly struggled to complete assignments, to be a full-time mother, a full-time employee in child protective investigations, and be a new homeowner. However, there are consequences for not getting tasks done. You have to be able to prioritize your time. The second question they asked is, if you were a student in this class and learned that the professor made an exception for the student, would you think she acted ethically? No, I wouldn't. I would be furious to know that an exception was made for a person who cut corners to complete the same assignment that I was asked to complete and that I took the time to do. The third question asked students to look at Table 12.1 regarding the 6 pillars of character. The question asks, which of these 6 pillars did the professor display in consideration for her student and how? That table lists trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, and citizenship. The professor obviously showed caring for her student as she listened to the sob story presented, but failed to address responsibility of this student or fairness to the other students. The fourth question asks, the professor's actions ultimately brought into question whether or not the ends justify the means. Do you feel that her leniency in this case made her a stronger or more ethical leader? I said no, because it made her a more well-liked professor, but failed to teach a valuable lesson to the student about cheating in order to succeed. I chose this topic for this assignment due to being able to relate as a college student. It can be tempting to find ways to cut corners, especially as an unconventional student. As someone who is also in the workplace, I know that falsifying documentation in my field is a fireable offense that can result in legal repercussions. Plagiarizing, in my opinion, is the same situation but in the school setting. The second case study I've chosen for this assignment is found in Chapter 11 on page 265, titled Office Space. This case study follows a computer programming team who has just been asked to relocate from an open space where the team collaborated together into a small space with cubicles. Not only are there walls preventing the team members from speaking to one another to share ideas, but their seats have been assigned to them, creating tension in the group. One member feels as though he was given the worst cubicle due to it not having any windows, despite it being the biggest cubicle and purposely given to him due to the amount of equipment he has. This employee has distanced himself from the group, choosing to work alone and only seeking help when in crisis. Another employee is frustrated that he has been placed between two chatty Cathys in order to separate the two, but preventing him from being able to focus. He has become agitated and also prefers to stay away from the group, especially the two that constantly chat with one another. The leader of the group becomes frustrated as he watches his formerly cohesive unit begin to fall apart. The first question asked, how would you describe the conflict that has arisen between the members of the web programming department? My answer was that due to the manager of the department not communicating his rationale behind the placement of each team member, tension and conflict has built based off of the feelings of a loss of control. The second question asks if the conflict is a relational conflict, and if so, what type of relational conflict? Is there a content dimension to this conflict? I said that the department is currently having a relational conflict as all believe they are being personally targeted and elements are outside of their control. The study goes on to ask, which method of principled negotiation would I use to separate the people from the problem? Because the team was so strongly connected prior to the division by circumstance, I think that the root of the issue is a lack of connectedness. To address this issue, I would take personal relationships out of the equation to speak to each team member separately to outline the issues and explain the reasoning behind the seat choices. For the member who was given the seat without a window, I would explain that he was actually accommodated so that he would not be cramped for space. To the employee that is in the middle of the two talkative employees, I would explain that trust was instilled in him to mitigate some of the excessive talking. Sometimes by making an employee feel valuable, the employee wants to rise to the challenge to please the managing personnel. The next question asked how you would characterize each employee's conflict style. The employee in the cubicle without a window is practicing avoidance by keeping to himself unless an issue gets so out of hand that it becomes a crisis that he's unable to manage on his own. The employee who's in the middle of the other two employees is competing with the others, but not in the traditional sense. Instead of telling the other two employees that he's unable to concentrate when they are talking across him, he chooses to yell out of frustration over their conversation. However, it could also be argued that he's accommodating their frequent talks by ignoring his own needs and allowing the behaviors to continue. The other two employees, in my opinion, are also competing by giving kickback at the seating arrangement. They are doing this by causing more of an issue that already existed. The final question asks how could the manager use fractionation and face saving in attempting to resolve this conflict. So the manager could tackle each member's complaints individually. He could ask the employee in the larger cubicle if he would rather have a smaller space but be closer to the manager since they do work on projects together. However, he would have to agree to put up with the constant talking of the employees on either side of him. For the employee who's becoming frustrated by the talking, it could be offered that he move to the last cubicle, resulting in him having one employee near him. It seems as though the employees feel as if their needs were not considered when seating arrangements were made. Through face saving, the manager could explain to each employee why their seats have been chosen, as it was done with a purpose that was intended to be beneficial to each of them. I chose this case study because I can personally relate to the conflict. In our office, cubicle seats have been a hot topic for the past 3 months. Recently, we've gotten new management that wanted everyone to sit in teams to support one another. However, employees became extremely heated about the changes. I was curious as to how to manage this situation to eliminate the hostility.